The date is January 17th, 1991. Operation Desert Storm has just begun, and the world watches as American forces launch their offensive against Iraq. Meanwhile, in the realm of professional wrestling, an unprecedented storyline unfolds, one that will blur the lines between entertainment and reality, patriotism and propaganda, in ways that would both captivate and disturb audiences for years to come. 2 nights later, at the Royal Rumble, Sergeant Slaughter, once wrestling's ultimate American hero, stands in the ring draped in polarizing Iraqi attire. The man who had once embodied the essence of American military pride has turned his back on his country, aligning himself with Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein. It's a moment of perfect theatrical villainy, yet one that would prove dangerously controversial given the real soldiers fighting and dying in the Persian Gulf at that very moment. This audacious angle would culminate at WrestleMania 7 on March 24, 1991, at the Los Angeles Memorial Sports Arena in front of 16,000 ardent fans. In the main event, Sergeant Slaughter would defend his championship belt against Hulk Hogan. The Federation had to relocate the event from the massive Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum to the smaller sports arena, citing security concerns over Slaughter's controversial character. Whether these concerns were legitimate or a cover for poor ticket sales remains debated to this day. Security was indeed tight that night, with Slaughter requiring genuine protection due to death threats. The match itself was a spectacle of classic wrestling storytelling. Hogan, wrapped in the American flag, versus Slaughter, who had traded his traditional stars and stripes for Iraqi symbols. When Hogan finally prevailed with his legendary leg drop, pinning Slaughter to recapture the championship, the arena erupted. It was more than just a wrestling victory. It was packaged as America's triumph, a symbolic victory during a time of real war. This moment represented both the pinnacle and the most controversial point of Sergeant Slaughter's career. But to understand how wrestling's ultimate patriot became its most reviled traitor, we need to go back to the beginning, to the man behind the character. Robert Rudolph Remus was born in Detroit, Michigan, on August 27, 1948. Remus grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, a crucial detail given the city's rich wrestling heritage. The irony of Sergeant Slaughter's military persona would only become apparent years later, for Remus never actually served in the military. In fact, during the Vietnam War, he received several draft deferments and was actively involved in the anti-war movement, participating in protests against the very conflict his future character would claim to have fought in. His journey into professional wrestling began in 1974 in the legendary AWA wrestling territory. Initially performing under his real name, Remus struggled to find a character that truly connected with audiences. It wasn't until 1980, when he joined the WWF, that the Sergeant Slaughter persona began to take shape. The character was a masterpiece of wrestling psychology, a tough-as-nails drill instructor who demanded respect and discipline from both his opponents and the audience. Slaughter's signature moves, including the Cobra Clutch submission hold, became feared finishers in the wrestling world. His catchphrases, delivered in a gravelly voice that seemed to channel R. Lee Ermey from Full Metal Jacket, became instantly recognizable.
Now that's an order!
Slaughter engaged in a memorable feud with Bob Backlund in 1980 through 1981. Their technical wrestling classics helped establish Slaughter as more than just a character. He was a legitimate in-ring performer who could hang with the best. Their 1981 match at the Philadelphia Spectrum went to a 60-minute time limit draw and received widespread acclaim from wrestling publications of the era. And then there was the boot camp match against Pat Patterson, which was revolutionary for its time. The stipulation required wrestlers to make their opponent verbally submit, predating the modern I Quit match format. Patterson and Slaughter brawled through the crowd and used the Garden's environment to create a violent spectacle that would influence hardcore wrestling for decades to come. Slaughter emerged victorious after nearly 30 minutes of brutal combat, applying the Cobra Clutch until Patterson finally surrendered. Slaughter's series with the Iron Sheik was also significant. Their 1984 boot camp match at Madison Square Garden wasn't just a match. It was a cultural moment that captured the zeitgeist of Cold War America. The Iron Sheik, fresh off losing the championship to Hulk Hogan, brought intense credibility as a former Olympic wrestler, Their match featured remarkable technical wrestling interspersed with brawling, as Slaughter defended America's honor against the former champion. The finish came when Slaughter countered the camel clutch into his own cobra clutch, forcing the Sheik to submit. This match drew one of the largest gates in Garden history for a non-championship match. Slaughter then left the Federation due to a dispute over his G.I. Joe action figure deal, conflicting with Vince McMahon's plans to launch a wrestling action figure line. He returned to the AWA, where he would capture the World Heavyweight Championship from Larry Zbyszko. During this period, Slaughter maintained his patriotic character, even as he feuded with AWA's top stars. His return to the WWF in 1990 would prove to be the most significant and controversial chapter of his career. Initially returning as a hero, the WWF creative team made the bold decision to turn him heel as tensions in the Middle East escalated. Then, on January 19, 1991, Slaughter defeated the Ultimate Warrior for the championship at the Royal Rumble. This victory set up the collision course with Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 7. The Iraqi sympathizer storyline was unprecedented in its topicality and risk. Every week on WWF television, Slaughter would appear with his manager, General Adnan, praising Saddam Hussein and denigrating American values. The heat was nuclear. In an era before widespread internet access and social media, many fans believed Slaughter had genuinely turned against his country. Death threats became so serious that he often needed actual security protection at events. Following his loss to Hogan at WrestleMania 7, Slaughter unveiled a surprising new ally, Colonel Mustafa, none other than his former rival, the Iron Sheik. This unexpected alliance fueled an intense months-long feud with Hulk Hogan, culminating in a high-stakes 3-on-2 handicap match at SummerSlam. In a hard-fought battle, Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior ultimately triumphed over the Triangle of Terror, marking a decisive victory in their heated rivalry. Subsequently, Slaughter's character gradually began showing remorse for his actions, and he eventually turned face again. The reformation was complete when he began crying while saluting the American flag, begging for forgiveness from the fans. Throughout the remainder of the 1990s, Slaughter transitioned into various roles within the Federation. He became a commissioner, manager, and occasional wrestler, maintaining his military persona, but now as a respected veteran figure. What makes Slaughter's case particularly fascinating is the dichotomy between character and performer. While Remus created one of wrestling's most memorable military personalities, his own anti-war activism during Vietnam presents a stark contrast. This duality speaks to both the power of wrestling characters and the complex relationships between performers and their on-screen personas. The G.I. Joe connection proved to be both a blessing and a curse for Slaughter's career. In 1985, he became the first professional wrestler to be immortalized as a G.I. Joe action figure. His character appeared in both the animated series and comic books, where he was portrayed as a tough but fair drill instructor who helped train the G.I. Joe team. The G.I. Joe deal was lucrative enough that Slaughter could afford to leave WWF at its national expansion peak. He appeared in animated episodes between 1985 and 1986, voicing his own character and helping to craft storylines that often mirrored his wrestling persona. The action figure became one of the line's best sellers, with multiple variations released. After his controversial championship run in 1991, Slaughter's career entered a fascinating new phase. His redemption angle, where he begged forgiveness from the American people, was punctuated by emotional promos where the typically stoic sergeant broke down in tears while saluting the flag. By 1997, Slaughter had transitioned into the role of WWF Commissioner, a position that showcased his talent for authority figure roles. During the Attitude Era, he became embroiled in memorable segments with D-Generation X, particularly Triple H and Shawn Michaels, who would mock his military bearing and catchphrases. Despite the comedic nature of these segments, Slaughter maintained the gravitas of his character, providing a perfect foil for DX's anti-authority antics. In the 2000s, Slaughter became a valuable ambassador for WWE, appearing at numerous military tribute shows, including Tribute to the Troops events. His presence lent legitimacy to WWE's support of the armed forces, even though he himself had never served. This complex dynamic, a peace activist who became wrestling's military icon, added layers of intrigue to every appearance. In 2004, Sergeant Slaughter was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, a recognition of his significant contributions to professional wrestling. In the end, Sergeant Slaughter remains one of professional wrestling's most complex characters, a figure who embodied American patriotism, while being portrayed by a former anti-war activist, a beloved hero who became one of wrestling's most hated villains, and a character whose evolution paralleled wrestling's own journey from simple morality tales to more nuanced storytelling. The era of Sergeant Slaughter represents a time in professional wrestling that we're unlikely to see again, when storylines could generate genuine hatred, when characters could blur the lines between fiction and reality so effectively that they required real-world protection, and when wrestling could still shock audiences with its audacity. He helped pave the way for the complex character work that would define wrestling's later eras, proving that even in a world of sports entertainment, sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones that hit closest to home. Thank you for watching.